What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Fringe. It's time to talk about Alberta again because things are heating up and a lot of different stories, a lot of news is making headway, a lot of fire coming against Danielle Smith for essentially allowing Albertans to have the right to cast their ballot, to do the work, to form enough signatures to grant a petition for referendum, exercising their democratic right. I don't see what the problem is here. Over the last few days, we've had First Nations getting up in a huff. We've had people all over social media saying, well, you can't just leave Canada. The resources belong to so and so. We've even seen it in our live streams when people want to debate where resources are going from. I'm here today to clear the air a little bit, to give you some facts, some fringe facts here on the channel, courtesy of super lawyer Keith Wilson, who I had to give a shout out last night on Twitter because he was doing an absolutely phenomenal job spreading the word, making sure people understand the facts, people know what's going on. And as we head into summer, as we see these rallies continue to grow and people starting to question what they want to do when we get the chance to answer the question on a ballot, should we stay? Should we go? I know that's not going to be how the question is formed, but you get the gist of it. I want to talk a little bit about why this is so groundbreaking and why we're covering it so much. It's actually making international news now by the US. Now, a lot of people talked about Donald Trump's absolute smackdown of Mark Carney while Carney was in the office, the Oval Office. It's funny because there's so many liberals out there and so many outlets reporting that Mark Carney stood up to Trump, that he did better than Pierre could have, and all this hoopla. You know it's going to go this way for Mark Carney because, well, they got nothing else better to do. They have to prop him up. Keith Wilson again. Everything I'm showing today is courtesy of Keith Wilson for the most part. So again, shout out to Keith and all the incredible work he's doing. I'm hoping to get him here on the channel at some point. I know he's, as you can see, been very busy. But thankfully, the information is here. We can start giving you guys some facts as to how things would work, the rules, who owns what, why Alberta's allowed to leave, and etc. But first, I want to show this, because this is where things are going to heat up. With Donald Trump's discussion of 51st state, many people saying that Donald's going to come in and make Danielle an offer at some point. I don't think that's going to happen. However, it's important to show that even the Americans are paying attention to this now. It's major, major news. Fox News covers Alberta's secession debate. More than 33% want out, frustrated by Ottawa's take on $1 trillion in resources with minimal return, says Premier Smith. Canada's legal secession process could make it real. Let's take a look at the clip from Fox News, and then we'll move on to the legal end of things.
By the way, there is something going on in Canada that people here in the States don't really know about. There is a move by a couple of provinces, primarily Alberta in the West, which has a lot of oil. It's a very rich province. Right. The Premier has suggested that they're not getting anything from the federal government. They're giving billions. At one point, the Premier is a woman. She said, Premier Smith said that they've given $1 trillion worth of mineral wealth to Ottawa, to the central government, and have received practically nothing in return. 33% of Albertans want to secede from Canada. Yep. And remember that Quebec tried to do that a couple of decades ago. It actually went to the Canadian Supreme Court in 1998, and they outlined a process by which you can secede. It's the only Commonwealth nation that allows a nonviolent process for secession. So I think Donald Trump and this 51st state thing is playing into that, what's going on in Canada. It seems
chip
totally
off
out of the
a piece
ballpark.
at a time and do business with the very oil-rich section of Canada.
Exactly.
And I think that he basically is saying, look, I've seen people who appeared incalcitrant, and I've done deals with them in the past.
So the reason I wanted to show this, and the reason I wanted to put this out here, is it's showing that the Americans are paying attention. They're watching what's going on. Why it's so important is that they're alluding, hey, maybe Donald Trump's having an effect on this. No, this is decades-long debate. This is people who are fed up with how the government's treating them. And as they're saying, well, there are rules. There are certain constituencies. Quebec tried to do it. Alberta's able to do it. Let's go over some of that. Because I want to get into some of the opinions moving back and forth. I want to give you guys a layout of the land so that when people are telling you Alberta's not allowed to leave, or Alberta doesn't own the oil that it's sitting on, or the Indigenous First Nations are having issues saying that they're going to protest and stop Alberta from leaving, that they can't leave. Let's clear all that up right now. Don Braid, very left-wing pundit, journalist, if you could call him that, for the Calgary Sun, wrote out, will Smith consider a yes vote to separate binding? Asked directly, she won't say. Now, their job is to paint Danielle as a villain. They've been doing that ever since and again, she has never once said that she's promoting separation. She has never once jumped on that bandwagon. She has simply said it's up to the citizens of Alberta to put together enough signatures, and if those are done, we have to respect our democratic rules. Keith Wilson laying out here, Don, the Supreme Court of Canada mandates good faith negotiations following a successful independence vote. No premier, including Danielle Smith, can opt out. So again, they're trying to paint her as a villain. She cannot opt out according to the law. The law binds them to respect the people's will. This is the third time I've clarified this for you. Please review the ruling and give up on your failed gotcha attempts with the premier. So again, you're going to see this as time goes on. All of these outlets, mainstream media, they're already doing it with First Nations, saying, look at Danielle Smith. She's a racist. She needs to leave, step down. She's destroying Alberta's integrity. She's bound by law and cannot opt out from the rules and regulations put forward in our province. She's doing what Justin Trudeau and the Liberals don't do, which is allow people to actually use their constitutional rights and exercise them to the fullest extent. Now, when people talk about our natural resources, Keith Wilson clarifies this again, because many people have said Alberta does not own the oil from which it's on their land. Keith clarifies that here. The 1930 Natural Resources Transfer Agreement, which is a constitutional instrument, transferred all lands, water, and natural resources within Alberta from the Government of Canada to the Government of Alberta. So this isn't Crown lands. So it says here, the only federal Crown lands in Alberta are the areas of land in the 4 national parks, military bases, and First Nations reserves. The federal Crown lands comprise approximately 20% of Alberta's total land base. See the map below. Here is a link to the 1930 NRTA, or the Natural Resources Transfer Agreement. Now down here on the map, it shows you specifically those areas. Again, I mentioned this in live stream last week, and a lot of people said, no, it's not 20%. It's more than, get your facts straight. It's right here in plain English for you. Keith Wilson, again, I will take what he says as fact. He is a constitutional lawyer. He understands boundaries, the law. He's done property negotiations before. I will take his word over anybody else's at this point. And because this is where it starts to get murky. The mainstream media has painted now that First Nations are being disrespected. Danielle Smith is a terrible, terrible human being. 2 days ago in Edmonton, this news conference took place. Great Twitter account, Table Salt, saying, I generally support First Nations, but wow, throwing a direct democracy law on the ground like garbage is a lot. I want to take a look at this clip, because there's a lot of this out there. Many First Nations chiefs speaking up. Some have said, hey, if you don't like Alberta, leave. You can't separate. You can't go anywhere. Let's hear what he has to say.
Bill 54, this is what we think of you. You're garbage like that. This is treaty land, and we stand on it today.
This is treaty country, and any talk of separation is really insanity.
Bill.
So what's funny is that, first off, the Canadian government pays them for their treaty land. What they just did is absolutely disrespectful. I'm not going to disagree. I have no problem with First Nations people. I quite enjoy the company of First Nations people. I know many people who have Indigenous descent. Now, that's not me trying to get a card or say that, hey, I get a free play because I know somebody who knows somebody. I'm saying that this is no disrespect towards those people. They're free to have a vote in said referendum. In fact, again, Keith Wilson clarifies that here. The same video, which was shared down here from Real Talk Ryan Jesperson, saying Alberta can't just separate from Canada. And of course, he's showing Danielle Smith's quotes as well as the video that we just showed. Keith has his maps up here, but I want to go through with what Keith says so that everybody understands the laws again, because you're going to encounter this anytime you go to a rally, anytime you're talking with colleagues or people who disagree with you and say, well, the treaties are there, it's land, it belongs to the Indigenous. You can't just leave, you can't just separate without considering the Indigenous. You're robbing them, Danielle Smith is right, etc. You guys get the picture by now. Keith responds, Ryan, respectfully, your post is misleading. The process set out by the Supreme Court of Canada in the 1998 Quebec secession reference case directly addresses protecting First Nations rights, as does the resulting Clarity Act. So we talked about Mr. Rath, how he is an actual, he's the same as Keith Wilson. He's a constitutional lawyer. He's worked for many years with First Nations. And he even said in a previous video, we wouldn't have taken the time to put all this together if we didn't know that we had the rights to do so. We wouldn't waste everyone's time. Keith goes on to say, nothing that Premier has announced in any way reduces First Nations rights. In fact, it gives First Nations more options for their future. Here are the details on the separation process and First Nations rights and the role of their treaties. Again, this is the law. So anybody who tells you you're wrong, you can simply quote this. It's the law. 1. All eligible Alberta voters can vote in the independence referendum, including members of First Nations, one person, one vote. No special treatment for members of First Nations re-voting in the referendum. 2. Upon a successful vote for separation, the province of Alberta, First Nations within Alberta, the other provinces, and the Government of Canada are obligated to engage in good faith negotiations to establish the terms of Alberta's separation. So they're all obligated by law. They can't, and Keith has mentioned this in other videos, they can't say, oh, I don't agree with the outcome, I don't like the outcome, I'm not going to sit down. They are obligated by law to do so. And it's to engage in negotiations to establish the terms of Alberta's separation. So again, they can't shut it down or veto. Point 3, Alberta First Nations would have the following options, at a minimum, to determine their post-separation status. Again, Danielle Smith mentioned during her address to Alberta, the address to Canada, that she would only move forward so long as the treaties are respected based on the legal ramifications in which they are outlined. So here's where that all comes into play. Here's their options. A, their reserve lands are to remain owned by Canada, with treaties still administered by the Government of Canada. Status quo, nothing changes. So everything stays the same for them. They still get their checks from the Canadian government. They're still handled by the Canadian government. Alberta has nothing to do with it. It's Canada land, Crown land. B, they can request that the new government of Alberta assume the responsibilities of the Government of Canada under existing treaties. And in brackets, only material change is which government administers the treaties. So this is again where I've said it would come over, and Alberta already, when you talk about the transfer payments they send to Quebec, across the country, other have-not provinces, this money could simply be moved towards First Nations people. Or C, they could negotiate a new framework agreement with Alberta to replace and modernize existing treaties. And point 4, importantly, the First Nations themselves would decide which option to pursue as part of the secession negotiations, but they do not have a veto on whether Alberta separates. That's it, plain English, in law. So anybody telling you you're stealing from them, the premier's a racist, the premier doesn't care about their rights are all laid out here. These are the rights within Canada's laws, within the Constitution. 5, he puts here, as confirmed in the map below, the government of Alberta owns almost all of the land and the oil and gas within Alberta resulting from the 1930 Natural Resources transfer agreement. So again, we talked about that because many people, you see the treaty zones here in Alberta, you see the map here. So a lot of people say, well, the oil isn't Alberta's, it's Canada's. It doesn't belong to Alberta. They can't take it with them. This is people failing to cope. This is people who just don't want to admit they don't know what they're talking about, or they're mad that after all this abuse, Albertans are starting to wake up and the gravy train's running out. This is the equivalency, and I've mentioned it before as an example of a domestic abuse case where the husband is beating the wife and saying, you can't leave, you'll be nothing without me. Anybody from other provinces that are screaming right now saying, you can't go anywhere, that's not your oil, those are people who are mad because things will change for them if Alberta leaves. Some of their projects may be defunded. The government will not have the money to supply them with resources for other projects that normally they would spend money on because they'll be making up for the lost revenue coming from Alberta. This is where we've used the old term, F around and find out. It isn't just the government. There are municipalities, there are smaller forms of government that abuse Alberta, that have abused Alberta. We've seen Premier Legault, we've seen Yves Blanchette calling out Alberta, saying that we don't have an identity like Quebec. And I'm going to be covering that in another video. These are all people that are butthurt because they're mad that Alberta is exercising their rights, that the people of Alberta have a say, that we don't live in a dictatorship where they can just make up the rules as they go along, and Albertans just have to keep towing the line and continue taking the abuse. Now, again, I'm not promoting anything about anything. I've told you that throughout this process, I think people know where I stand, and I'm going to try and remain as much Switzerland as possible. But these are the facts. And anybody who tries to tell you otherwise clearly does not know the law. They're angry. They don't care about the law. They're ignorant to it. Have whatever you may. But Keith Wilson has done a fantastic job and continues to do a fantastic job outlining to everybody just where the rules follow, what is what. This isn't an attack on anybody. It is not stealing of land. It's not ignoring anybody. These are our rights and laws, and Danielle Smith has not put anything forward or pushed for anything. She is merely doing her due diligence to be obligated to the law. She has to do these things as premier. She doesn't have a choice. Much like the First Nations, she cannot opt out or veto. It's part of her obligations as premier. With that being said, let me know what you guys think down below. Do you think the Indigenous have every right to complain the way that they are? Do you think that you still feel they have an argument in this process? Again, it's funny when we mention Quebec that when they wanted to separate in the 90s, none of this came up. None of this was an issue. But as soon as the West wakes up, well, that's a big difference. It's all about money, folks. But let me know if you think they still have a right to complain, or say that we're stealing land, or that they own it. Let me know your thoughts down below. Let me know your thoughts on these clarifications, and if there's anything else we need to answer, and I'll do my best to get those answers out to you folks. Again, we just want to show the truth. We just want to show you how the process would work, how things would go moving forward, just so everybody's educated. Nothing but facts here, folks. With that said, I hope this video was entertaining for you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was informative. If it is, hopefully it earned your subscription. We're on the very cusp of 100,000 subscribers. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It's free. It helps the channel. It gets us over that mark. And it has you joining our ultra mega massive fringe majority here on the channel. I know that's a weird way of putting it. We're just having some fun with it. Turn on your bell for all notifications so that you don't miss a beat anytime new content drops on this channel. Join me live here on the channel each and every Friday night for Friday Night Fringe, our live streaming show where I'm joined by the beautiful Mrs. Fringe as we go over everything that happened this week in politics, everything we know that's coming up in the week ahead, as well as back and forth within Q&A in the greatest YouTube community on the platform. Full stop. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say outside of making these videos. And I most look forward to hearing what you have to say this Friday night, starting at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, here on the channel. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next one.